Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure Podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I will be bringing you thoughts, ideas and stories from some incredible guests to hopefully inspire you to live more adventurously in your everyday lives. So now on with today's show. Today I am super excited to welcome Louis Hall to the show. Louis is a writer, a rider and explorer from Scotland. And aged 18, he first discovered the power of the horse while in search of a tribe in northern Mongolia. And since then, he has gone on to ride the length of the UK and across Europe in aid of charitable causes. In 2020, he founded the Big Hoof, which is a charity that promotes adventure and well-being through long-distance horse rides. And so far, the Big Hoof has travelled over 4,000 kilometres in 5 different countries, raising over £70,000 for causes centred on mental health, well-being and child welfare. And in 2022, Louis created the first conclusive horse trail across the Ligurian Alps on his way from Siena in Italy to Cape Finisterre in Spain. And he now has his eyes set on America and the Silk Road. And in addition to that, Louis has been doing some amazing work in partnership based in Ukraine, which helps to replace windows that have been blown out by the war. I first came across Louis when he very kindly invited me to join him on an Instagram Live whilst he was travelling on his horse trek last year, to speak about all things everyday adventures and resilience to work. Obviously, those of you who have listened to this know that I could speak at length about these, but had such a wonderful conversation with Louis that I immediately wanted to invite him back onto the podcast, return the favour, but also really explore the work that he's been doing with the Big Hoof. So Louis, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I would love to know more. I think because, like I said, with some of our guests, they've done sort of one adventure or they're focusing on a particular challenge at one time. And I know that you have got, a particular challenge going on, but that also, the Big Hoof is a sort of a bigger concept than that. And you've done, multiple challenge previously. And I think it would just be really helpful to sort of get a sense of, what inspired you to set it up? What's the aim? What's the motivation? All of those sort of things. That would be amazing.
Well, no, thank you, Nikki, so much for having me. I think with the point that I've got to now, I think like it is with lots of people, it was a stumbling. I just stumbled into it, and it's slowly grown its own kind of legs as it's gone. I mean, it began just through understanding how a horse can connect people from all sorts of backgrounds, but also for all sorts of reasons. And as I've subsequently discovered, it crosses all borders, it crosses abilities, it crosses an inability for people to perhaps vocalize things. It's a neutral symbol that draws people, and a very primitive one to us. But that all began when I was, I think 18 was probably when that spiritual side of the horse began to kind of be very clear to me. And then my first ride was in lockdown in 2020, and a friend of mine, Leo, he had died of cystic fibrosis a couple of years previously, and I felt during the lockdown a huge, as many people obviously did, a huge claustrophobia and a frustration at what potentially would be the outcome of all this, and the kind of crushing way that rules and laws and obstacles were making people think. One mainly is that you cannot go out and explore, you can't meet strangers, you can't connect to people. Communities were shut down. In every form of community was shut down. It was a time of total isolation, and that was very damaging. I thought it could be very damaging, and in a kind of knee-jerk reaction, and with the spirit of my friend Leo, who was a very big advocate for going into the unknown and believing and taking advantage of the world around you in a positive way, and using the time that you kind of have been gifted on Earth. I decided to ride a horse from John O'Groats to Land's End, and again using that idea of neutral connection that I had learned from my first experiences with the horses in Mongolia when I was 18. And then I went down the country and thought in a way it would be a trial of endurance and combating elements and what have you. But I realized very quickly that it was a journey for everyone. It was again, the horse, the power of the horse being at the center of it. it brought people together, and suddenly this one person journey became a vehicle for all sorts of people from everywhere around the country that kind of wanted an excuse to and wanted a reason to come out and feel something a bit deeper and connect to something beyond what they've been told to connect to. And then from the moment that I began, and certainly when I reached Land's End, I just thought there's no way that this message and this feeling has to end. I think it's a time it's needed now, maybe more than ever. And so that's when I set out to establish the Big Hoof, which was just a name for that journey. I think a journalist called it that, and I set out to establish the Big Hoof as a charity to allow these journeys to continue in whatever form they might be. And sure enough, they have meandered and we've evolved into something that we are now, and it will continue to, as I say, stumble and change but grow. I think again with this idea of connection and adventure in big and small ways, but the power of the horse being at the center of it.
I love that. I love that when you talk about the sort of the charity and the concept of sort of meandering and growing, and in my head I've just got this picture of sort of meandering and growing as you're wandering along on a horse as well. It's that sort of, it feels very, very in tune to actually what you're doing, and like you said, traveling by horseback. And I think it's so interesting that the concept in a way came out of the need for connection, or what transformed that sort of sense of how we connect and how we form communities, and sort of then evolved into, with the charitable aspect, but also feeling like there is potential to expand this and having multiple aims as well. So what are some of the adventures, or it feels a little bit sort of, I don't know, restrictive to call them adventures in a way, but some of the journeys you've been on sort of since that initial idea. And I guess just thinking about the challenges that you faced along the way, because I think sometimes, like you said, you expect something to be challenging for a particular reason, but then it becomes a challenge for all sorts of other reasons. So I'll just be really interested, because I think we first connected when you were traveling through Spain. Yeah, and which was an immense journey in itself. And then obviously the work that you've now been doing with Ukraine. I think it'd just be interesting to know what are some of the challenges you've come across which you haven't expected, and how you've sort of navigated through those as well.
Well, I think a lot actually is to do with our first meeting when I interviewed you about resilience at work and about the little challenges, the everyday things, and the connection on a daily level, and putting oneself out there on a daily level. That was, with all the things that the Big Hoof, or I've been lucky to be part of, have managed to, inverted commas, achieve, or whatever word you want to use. There's one thing is distances covered and destinations reached, and routes pioneered, and the rest of it. But then the biggest thing that has surprised me, I think maybe two things that have endured surprising me with everything that we do. It's number one is that nothing is as it seems. So this idea of expecting one thing and planning, and I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I am the worst planner, and actually hate planning, which is in a way kind of good, because nothing really happens how you want it to happen, because you forget that actually there's billions of other people and other forces at work that you're not aware of, and you think you can control everything, but you can control nothing in that sense. But then obviously you need to plan a little bit, otherwise the well-being of yourself and others and a horse may not be as happy. So there's I think the first thing that one forgets, or that I certainly am surprised about every time, is the lack of control you really have. But with that, it may sound like a daunting thing, but it's actually incredibly liberating once you give over to that, because I find myself then becoming part of something so much bigger, something that's come before me for hundreds and thousands of years, something that's going to go beyond me, hopefully, for thousands and millions of years. And it's this concept that we as humans and as an individual are also connected to, the land that we're on, and to paths that have been trodden before us, and to people around us. So it's this understanding that we are, you can control nothing. You can set out for one aim, and you certainly won't reach that aim, but the aim that perhaps wasn't intended will come to you. And the second thing is, with that lack of control is a family of human beings who are also in this place of no control. And so the power and kindness of strangers is something that blows me away every single step I take of every single journey. As I said, commencing on the ride from John O'Groats to Land's End, all I thought about it was, all I imagined it in my head was it just me and this horse? And then the reality is so different. The reality is so many is people, is these acts of kindness, these staying in someone's house, staying in someone's bothy, being tucked up with hot chocolate and whiskey and whatever, and then going off the next day with a family on horseback and being surrounded by people wanting to come out who suffer from cystic fibrosis, and then on the ride across Europe where I had the pleasure to interview you, not a single day would I have managed without acts of kindness from strangers. Not a single day. And again, you can plan, this is where I'm going to stop that night, this is where I'm going to stop that night, that's where I'm going to get feed from there. And you can go to the nth degree to plan. Or you can just trust, which I have perhaps, which I try and do, and obviously within limitations, I try and trust in this idea that there is little control, and that the unknown, stepping into that unknown and knowing that there are strangers out there who are perhaps just waiting to become friends, is extremely liberating. And in a way, then makes you feel and makes the things that you try and do very achievable, because you're never alone, and everything can be done with an idea that we're all kind of in this world trying to figure it all out together. But it's that breaching the isolation, breaching the idea that it's just you on a one-person mission, and then knowing that everyone else is there with you, that allows suddenly for things that you think are impossible, big and small, to become achievable. So I think those two things are always surprise me at most.
Gosh, there's so much in there. I sort of slightly don't know where to start, if I'm honest. I'm going to start with the fact that I love the fact that you said you hate planning, because I hate planning too. And I think often the best adventure, it's really interesting, because I think obviously, like you said, from a safety point of view and from taking care of, particularly with you with the horses, and making sure that your own and that their safety and health isn't going to be compromised is really important, and planning for that. But I think that point you make about where we plan to protect ourselves against the not knowing or against the uncertainty, I think is a really important point, because I think often the need to plan can prevent us from getting started sometimes. And I think often if we knew what was going to sort of happen on these sort of adventures, probably then you, half the time you go, actually, no, I don't think I'm going to bother. There's so much to do. But actually with that freedom of going, actually being open to what might come, who you might meet, what might happen, is an element of planning in itself, but it's a different sort of, like you said, it's sort of letting go of that need for control and having that trust. I think the second point I was going to come on to is that point about trust and actually how challenging that can be. I was thinking, I would imagine as you've done more of these journeys and as you've had more and more experience of being able to trust that people are there and will be open to you and will support you and all that sort of thing, the more you build up a bank of that knowledge, the easier it becomes to be able to go, you know what, it'll be okay.
Yeah, and it feels sort of strange trying to saying how that is the way forward, to trust and not plan. But then, there was a time when I was scared of that day one going down the UK, and it was a very different mindset. But I think which comes back to the point of, it's not about distances covered, destinations reached. It's about that very first step. And in terms of the planning side, to what extent are your plans actually closing doors to opportunities that allow you to discover more? And lots of people contact the Big Hoof, and I try as much as I can to give as much help and Zooms and chats with people planning big rides across Europe. Two of them, people are doing it now, and some it's interesting. There's sort of two mindsets. One is to completely obviously overplan and to work out all the routes. And you can imagine them there with hundreds of pieces of paper and all these connecting things and lots of folders and sticky tapes and all the rest of it. And then there's the other side who just it's just about a feeling, a feeling of wanting to go and explore. And that's the thing that will take you to the place you need to go. And that place may not be the place that you intended, but it will take you. It's the fuel, the undying fuel that will actually keep you going. And the way markers and the checkpoints and the bookings and the Airbnbs and whatever it is, or the stables that you've planned, that won't keep you going. It will just satisfy something that you're scared of, which is the letting go. But again, it starts small, again, I'm lucky to have done a lot of this and thousands of kilometers of riding into strangers' houses and not knowing where I'm going to sleep that night. But it does start, as it did with me, it starts very small, and it starts on just day one, and it might start on a walk or talking to someone you don't know, or talking to someone you don't really want to, but you feel like you should, or going to a party and you're scared. And it's just doing something small and brave for yourself, and only oneself can know what that really means. That then starts to open these doors, or the door of trust in the unknown. And that's the biggest planning you can do, I think, for me, is always just to allow yourself to create this mindset that it's okay to trust, and it's better to do that than to overplan and to close the door entirely.
Yeah, I love that point, starting with something small and brave, because in a way that's the sort of ethos of this podcast very much, is that we see the end result, or we see the journey, or we see the achievement, but we don't necessarily see the beginning. We see the bravery in terms of accomplishment. And I think often the bravery is the finding a way to take that first step, and where every part of your body is going, I really don't want to do this. And like you said, for somebody, it might be walking into a party where you don't, I know for me, that's a huge thing, walking into a room where you don't know people and going, right, I'm just going to find a way to do this. And I might go and hide in the toilets for 20 minutes. I'm not saying I do that, but I might. But going, there is a way, and the more you do it, the more you find a way to navigate those things that are difficult. And it's not necessarily the big thing. Like you said, it's the little sticking points along the way that we try and avoid. I think that says something about sort of, I guess, partly the motivation as well. I mean, your sort of recent work that you've been doing in Ukraine, in a way, is a slight departure from the travels that you've done beforehand. How did that come about? And, what have you, I suppose, learnt from the work that you've been doing out there? I think it's with Insulate Ukraine, is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
That must have been a very different sort of environment and sort of, evolution, I suppose, of the Big Hoof as well.
Yeah, the first and foremost, the Big Hoof being since its sort of creation as a charity, the idea was always to be one that can, a little bit like the horse, can connect and mobilize to in whatever direction it needs to do, and with welfare, well-being, mental health at the forefront. But it's where we choose that we can put our efforts best. So, but a friend of mine was in Ukraine for sort of 6-7 months last year, volunteering for charities all over, and he came back and met me and another friend, Harry, in London, and he was telling us of all his time there. And then he said the biggest problem that he thinks Ukrainians are going to face, especially Ukrainians from the devastated communities, are windows shattered by the war, blown out by the war. And my friend Harry is an engineer student. Well, he was until he stopped it for this, a PhD student at Cambridge University, and he set about to create a glassless window that would offer natural light and more insulation than double glazed window, but also shatterproof, which is obviously a big problem. And anyway, he created this with some engineering friends at Cambridge, and then he said, Louis, do you want to come out and do this with me? Basically implement this kind of laboratory idea into real life situation where it's needed. So yeah, we got set off from the 31st of December just last year, and then arrived into Kyiv, picked up loads of supplies. It's basically polyethylene, PVC piping and duct tape, and put it into a hire car, and then drove all the way to Izium, which is in the Kharkiv Oblast, eastern Ukraine. very close to Russia actually, and then arrived into this city that is just totally razed to the ground. It was so much worse than I could possibly imagine. And then set about to implement this window solution into every home that we possibly could. And sure enough, every single home you saw was either no longer in existence, it was rubble, or it had the black stains of a bomb or a mine or bullet holes. But most importantly, every window had been shattered, and they have road signs and sandbags and carpets as a replacement. But then obviously with the winter, that doesn't do much good. And it's minus 16 outside most of the time we were there in January. And the inside, though, the people are wearing sort of 3 coats, putting their hands over naked flames of a gas stove, or if they're lucky, they've got a wood burning stove. But there's ice on the inside, frames, or there's ice on the shattered glass on the inside. The inside temperature of most of the homes and apartments we were in was 2 degrees. So it was unlivable. And fortunately, Harry's design worked, and we started literally home by home implementing the windows. And sure enough, the temperature rose from up to 22 degrees within 8-9 hours, and the demand was massive. So people started contacting us with the help of a translator who created a Isium WhatsApp group, and it spread. And then we managed to convince the municipality to do it and the construction company to help us. And we now got sort of 5 or 6 volunteers out there, and we're going to hopefully spread to Curzon soon. Fortunately, obviously, winter is almost over, so temperatures are rising. But as I think the understanding is, it certainly won't be the last winter of this fight, although, of course, we hope and pray it will. So next winter will be, equally as important. So I was very different to anything on a horse, and a lot harder. I think with the horse, you always have to make those little brave steps and make those brave decisions, because you have a horse to look after, so you have to find a way to cross over the Bilbao estuary and convince a policeman to put your horse in a water taxi, because there is no other way, and you have to get this horse across, or you have to find a way to get it across the Ligurian Alps and take off the saddle, put all the kit in your rucksack and walk, because there is no other way. But with this, there's no hiding or kind of justification of this horse, and it's just between you or me rather, and your fellow human in a world apart. And it was very difficult to contrast your life and theirs, because one realize how extremely fortunate and lucky they are, and you get a bit sick of the kind of people worrying about gas bills and heating, when some people are literally shivering every single day and sleeping in a bath because it's the warmest place in their house, and they've obviously got no windows, and a lot of people have lost their family. All the people that we were trying to help were people who'd survived the Battle of Isium last year, Russian occupation for 5 months, and the retreat of the Russians. So they were survivors of 3 different elements, and most of them were widows, disabled, or extremely, extremely poor. And it was very, very difficult, because you saw the endurance in these people every single day, and the extraordinary prevailing ability to keep going in these totally unlivable conditions. And then you look at your own life and think, what can I perhaps be more grateful for or strive for more? But it was more than anything, it was just harrowing to see this, and much, much harder than anything I've done in terms of rides and adventures. This was the hardest thing. Fortunately, we were doing something practical. So you're putting up windows, you're making a tangible difference to someone's life every day, which was very satisfying. And I was taking lots of photos and writing about it to pitch it to newspapers, etc. But the human element was very, very tough.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you're saying that, actually, that part of the challenge in that sense of, I can make a difference here, but but that you're bearing witness to something really, really difficult as well. And that also has an impact, and leads you to question all sorts of other aspects of your own life, and it can be quite destabilizing in that sense. I think there's the bits that you take with you, and that, I guess, feed into your ambitions and your aims for next steps, but also in terms of all the things that you can't do. I think that's I know that feeling of guilt as well, that can sit alongside, I'm doing what I can to help, and we're here providing this sort of support, but also, every time that you're feeling discomfort or, you're focusing on your own struggles, that creeps in as well. And I was just wondering, how have you found a way to sort of reconcile that, or is it something you're still processing? Is it, is that something that you didn't necessarily anticipate, I guess, going in as well?
Yeah, I hadn't. I mean, none of us had really thought about what it was going to do to us, or I don't think one does when you embark upon this, because you probably wouldn't do it. I think it's important to remember that you're not them, and that wouldn't be helpful to anyone if you pretended you were. And that wouldn't be. You're not going to replace their life with yours. They won't want that. They're, as hard as it is to understand, they are in that place because it's their home, and the troubles that have been done to them obviously have nothing to do with them themselves. But they are there because that's where they're from. That's their life. It's a world apart from yours. I think also a little bit like the advice given to someone when they're drowning. You can't just jump in and join them and feel their suffering. That's not helpful to anyone. I think it's important to stay at an arm's length and give the support and help you can from a distance, which is difficult to kind of say, but it is the best and most effective way that you can actually help someone in that situation. So coming back, I think it only began to hit us. I mean, Harry's Harry's gone back out. He's still there. And I'm going back out in mid-March, but it kind of hit the human aspect of it all hit us quite hard when we came back after. And then, it's as you were suggesting, it's seeing the contrast between their life and your life, especially when you're kind of going through the streets of London and listening to people's conversations and complaining about this and that. And you just think it's very, upsetting, really, when and you've just seen, a couple of days before, people who are, so grateful for having a window that isn't shattered, any kind of things get put in perspective. But again, that's no one's fault, that's, except for obviously the perpetrators, that's no one's fault, because that's just how the world is. You can't have everyone feeling the same things all at the same time. But again, I think it's knowing that you're making a difference, and having that arm's length is an effective way to do that, and the most effective way to do that. But as you said, of course, the effects, seeing those things and living for a moment, for a second, the lives that they are living, was very important and useful for me, but very, very difficult. But it made me, it kind of after the dust settled, it reinstated that kind of belief that I must continue with the Big Hoof, and it's kind of led me to Izium. It will lead me to other places as well. The Big Hoof allowed the Harry's organization to gain charitable funding, so it helped that project get on its legs. So, but it kind of reinstated the power of what this charity can do. And so kind of installed a renewed sense of enthusiasm in a different way, in a way that only now I know, having seen Izium and also the other rides, that it's really important to keep going, because it can lead you to helping people that need it in all different ways, not only just emotional but certainly physical as well.
No, I was just thinking how it starts to shape your thinking and motivates you in different ways as well. I was just wondering, sort of bearing in mind all of the experiences you've had so far with the Big Hoof, whether they're the journeys across Europe or your recent experiences as well. I mean, what you can answer this in a short term or a long term way, so there's no rules, but what's next? What ambitions do you have in terms of the charity, or what or do you have plans for this summer, things coming up? What's the next steps, do you think, for you with the Big Hoof?
I think having sort of proven to myself in a way that the long ones, the big ones, are possible, I think I want to make lots and lots of small steps in the UK, and we are beginning we're about to launch a project called Fairways, and we're partnering with the British Pilgrimage Trust. And the idea with Fairways is to ride over, walk and run, long distance run as well, over all the pilgrimage routes in the UK, starting from Scotland all the way down Wales and obviously England. And we're partnering with a lady called Francesca Joy, who runs a podcast called Running on Joy. And the idea is basically to try and make these little routes, these little adventures as accessible as possible. Again, they're all in everyone's back garden. They're all in the country, on the land of this country, and at the root of it all is the central piece, which is obviously the power of the horse and connecting people through that. But at the same time, it's about community. It's about the land that we've come from, the routes that have been paved before us, and getting people to come together in all abilities, forms, and backgrounds over an old way that has almost perhaps almost been forgotten. So for me, that's going to be a very, very long-term Big Hoof mission, and we'll do rides, hopefully 1 or 2 a year, definitely 1 a year. The first one's in July, the St. Columba's Way. Again, encouraging walkers, riders, and runners and cyclists. I'll be there with, hopefully we're getting Sasha and Istia back from Europe. That's in the plans at the moment. We'll bring them back to Scotland, and they'll be there to walk with us, or I can ride them, or there's no prerequisite with that. It's just having them there and walking across these lovely old trails and getting as many people involved as possible and raising some money for charity and helping the local community as we go. So that's the kind of the UK plan, which I hope will be, the kind of bread and butter, if you like, of what we do here. And with regards to further afield, Kiki, the lady that joined me in my ride across Europe, has joined the Big Hoof now, and she and I are sort of planning a Europe ride again. You're trying to go through from basically west to east, and that's in the plannings. And we're trying to connect a lot of art galleries in it together for a focus on artists with neurological divergencies and mental health. And it's kind of a big project that is in the plannings. But again, it'll happen. If it does happen, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And then at the same time, there's a lovely guy in America who me and him have began to form an idea about a horse going down the Great Plains Trail, which is a trail that he's just newly sort of discovered and trying to promote. Again, one of sustainable travel and connecting people, and that's the kind of plan for 2024. But again, the small steps, the little adventures in the UK is what I would love to at least have the Big Hoof focus on. The other things, the other ideas, they come and they go, but the UK one is for sure the main aim for the Big Hoof.
Wow. I mean, there's not much then going on. It sounds amazing. I was just thinking, I love the idea of, in a way, taking a really big adventure or something that you've taken part in, and obviously with the horses and met people along the way, but then bringing that back to make it accessible in so many different ways for people sort of within the UK as well, and that sort of including people. I mean, in a way, it sort of leads to my next question, which is, around actually if someone's listening to this and going, whether it is taking their first step on their own adventure, or whether it is actually, I love the sound of, adventuring with horses, or whether it's actually, I just need to, I need to find that, what you were talking about, doing something small and brave, and that's just within their own work life or personal life. This conversation's been so full of that amazing advice, but I was just wondering if there was one piece of advice, if there's one thing you'd known right at the start of all of these, but as you were getting started with the Big Hoof and starting on your adventures, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, I think knowing now that it's nothing to do with the destination, and that it's about those small steps in between. I think knowing that now would have allowed me to be so much more confident in every little step. And I think the advice from that would be to know that no one's expecting you, and it won't happen, because that's not how life really works, to get from A to B in a straight line, as you might think it does on social media, Instagram, or you read a book and you think that's how it works. But just taking one small brave step for yourself, that's the achievement. And as long as you're moving, then you're going. And that's the adventure. And I think as soon as you realize that there is no end destination, and the achievement is not made in the kilometers done or the places reached or the routes pioneered, it's just about the little moments in between. That is the journey. And that's the thing that makes you want to keep going. And destinations are reached in other people's eyes, but for example, I feel I've only just begun, and because it's the little moments, it's the step by step that I crave, and also equally feel scared about, but I know that one foot in front of the other is the only way to get there. And then the second bit would definitely be, strangers. Not only are they in the same boat, but they are just friends waiting to happen. And it's very hard to say that, because obviously immediately the cynical mind will think, well, that's not true. There's so many bad people out there, which is all of what you hear about really in the media. But I promise that the vast majority are people who are really friends just waiting to happen. I mean, my horses now, me and Kiki's horses now, are living in the Pyrenees with a shepherd that we met for one night on our ride across Europe when we went over the Pyrenees. And naturally, we hadn't planned any stables, and we stayed with him for one night. And out of the blue, when we reached Cape Finisterre, he texted us saying, "I imagine you're wondering what to do with those lovely horses." And we were like, "Yeah, we have no idea what to do with these damn horses. What should we do?" And he said, "Well, bring them back here." And so since then, for the last 6 months, they've been living with Joachim, and we visit them. We've just been there, actually. Just got back a couple of days ago. And that was a stranger who is now a great friend. And every single night on that trip, and also with the trip down the UK, stayed with strangers who are now friends. And again, none of this destination or any of these places reached would have been possible without them. So I think knowing you're not alone, trusting in the kindness of strangers, and knowing that perhaps the destination is not the thing you need to reach, and that just one step ahead is the success. I think those two things would be the advice that I certainly would tell my younger self.
Wonderful. I love it. Yes. I think there's very little to add in this place, I think, other than I think the connection between those points that you just made too is so interesting, that how in a way one enables the other, and that, by breaking it into or having those small steps opens up so much possibility too. It's been absolutely wonderful. If people want to find out more about you, about the Big Hoof, about all these amazing adventures you've got coming up as well, where can they go? Yes.
Please join anything you want to join with the rides going forwards. As you will notice from the Instagram and Facebook and website, it's very badly managed because it's managed by me, so it's quite
I'm not in a place to criticize that yet.
But I'm sure one day we'll get some genius to do it all for me. But on the website, www.thebighoof.com, Instagram The Big Hoof, and Facebook, and we do keep it fairly up to date with at least with the projects that we're going to do. So the first one being the Fairways project in July in Scotland. So 10-12 days with strangers and friends and whoever you want to bring, walking, riding or cycling, whatever you want. Very relaxed, just enjoying being outside with each other. And those will continue, hopefully in the autumn, and definitely once a year. And as for that, we also have a few events. We do a Burns night in London, which was a great success this year. So celebration of Robert Burns and all things wild and Scottish and cultural. And that happens every year in January. And then we're opening up more events this year, hopefully, if I can organize myself. Please follow in whatever shape or form you can, and you're welcome whenever, however you want. And feel free to email and contact me and Kiki or the rest of the team with any questions, because we're very, very happy to help, as many people helped us before.
Brilliant. And I'll make sure I pop all those links in the show notes as well, so people can go and find them and find you really easily as well. Louis, I could have kept meandering with that conversation for a very long time, but I'm conscious I probably need to bring it to a close. Thank you so much for giving your time so generously, and for all those insights as well. And I'm wishing you every, piece of luck with your future endeavours with the Big Hoof as well.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And thank you again for allowing me to interview you back in Spain. No, it was really important for me to do that. I think your work certainly mirrors the step-by-step approach and the empowering effect that I think that has in all environments.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's a lovely place to end. So yeah, thank you so much and take care.
Okay, thank you, Nikki.
Bye.
Bye.
So I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Louis. I think the range, as I said at the intro, the range of adventures that he's undertaken and plans to undertake is really exciting, and the partnerships that he's created, and yeah, really excited to see where it all goes. The thing that I wanted to pick up on this week was the point around control and about planning to make sure that everything's okay, that our adventures when we start them have, we know what's happening, we know what kit to take, but also this wider picture, this wider piece around control, which is that sometimes our need to control, whether it's the environment or what's going to happen to us, can be the barrier that stops us from getting started in the first place. And I'm just going to expand on that bit. I don't know who said it. I think there's a quote out there somewhere that's something around, our need to control is basically our way of avoiding the possibility of death. That it's a way of trying to manage the environment so that we feel safe enough to be able to do the things that we want to do. But the reality is that none of us have any idea what's going to happen even in the next minute, let alone, throughout the whole duration of an adventure that we've got planned. And that's not negating the fact that obviously Louis made the point really clearly, you need to be able to plan, especially if you've got horses that you're looking after, or you've got a set amount of time and you need to make sure that timings will work, all of that sort of thing. But I guess it raises an interesting question that if all of that sort of was taken away from us, if we were to step out on adventure tomorrow without having given it any thought, how would that make us feel? Would we feel excited about the possibilities of what's out there, or would we feel intensely scared to the point at which we feel paralyzed to even begin with it? Because some adventures are pre-planned, and obviously many of the adventures that we talk about this show are, but some people have to go through adventures that they had no planning for. And to what extent do we trust our own resources, our own ability to think creatively and work a way through a problem or a challenge, and to feel that at some level this will be okay, that we will find a way through, that we will find a way to navigate it. And I certainly don't have any easy answers on this, but I think there is something very interesting around the psychology about adventure, that absolutely there is a need to plan for, to keep ourselves as safe as possible, to minimize the risk where we can. But part of adventure is about, can we take that step into the unknown, into not knowing what is around the corner, about what we're going to encounter? And can we trust our own resources, our own internal resources, to find a way to make that okay? Anyway, I'm going to leave you with that thought for today. That sounded like I was on Radio 4. I'm going to leave you with that thought for this week. I'd love to know what you think, where that balance is between control, between letting go, between letting things happen, and between, doing everything we can to make sure that an adventure or an activity that we do is a success. As always, please do reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram, Resilience at Work. You can find me on LinkedIn, Nikki Bass. You can find me on Facebook, Resilience at Work, or you can visit my website, resiliencework.co.uk. Otherwise, I will be back very soon with another episode, another wonderful guest, and I look forward to speaking to you then. In the meantime, take care. Bye.